Hello everybody, my name is Fraser Waldron, and in this video I want to share with you a framework or a technique that I use to reprocess negative information when I'm on the workplace, specifically when I was a first responder, when I was a police officer. So this is going to be a really nice video for anyone who's in police, firefighting, ambulance, people who work in trauma type situations, so doctors, nurses, therapists perhaps, anybody who's in a really sort of intense work environment where there's lots of negative energy, let's say, this would be a good video for you. So essentially this little framework, which is something I incorporated from a book called Against Empathy by Paul Bloom, a Canadian psychologist. He distinguishes the difference between people who use compassion versus empathy in the workplace, both at the micro and at the policy level as well. And I'll go through this in detail, of course. And I embedded that, I read this book and I recommend it. And I incorporated the teachings, let's say, and it made me a more effective police officer. And it also helped me avoid burnout and just sort of mental distress in high intensity situations. So the reason I needed this in the first place was because I was working up as a new police officer, I had under 2 years of experience, and I was way up in northern Canada, living on small indigenous communities, as well as just local little Canadian villages, less than 2,000 people, fly-in only communities. We used to ride snowmobiles and stuff to make arrests. It was a really wild time in my life. And I bounced around between many communities, but in one of the communities I was working in, it was essentially had the highest crime index in Canada. So a community of 2,500, our crime rate for like violent crime was over 100 times the average, for example. So this very small little community on a busy night when there's lots of alcohol in town and people were out and about and doing stuff, often we would get up to 60 calls per night between two officers who were working. We had like approximately 12 to 15 officers for that small community. So you can just imagine the size of a small high school, essentially. But we had a massive crime rate. So just really high volume. And a lot of it was violent crime. So stabbings, shootings, just sort of generic violence, like fighting and things like that. But a lot of bad injuries, a lot of really toxic environments to go into. And this drained a lot of the police officers on the team. So when I got there, I immediately thought, oh, I'm in a place where people are not happy in the workplace, let's say. And I could tell that people were having like issues, let's say, were in mental distress. So one night, for example, I was at the police station. It was an old house that had been renovated. So it was an old, crappy little house that they'd put like a jail cell on the like attached to like a door, essentially. And we had 4 jail cells, and people were always yelling and screaming and stuff when we bring them in, just because that's what they like to do. So we'd arrest some people, we'd throw them in the cell, and then sometimes they just scream, like not words or anything, but they just kind of scream. And sometimes it's really annoying, right? Because like where we worked, there's just one door where the house started. It was kind of like a living room that had been converted into like a operation center, or the place where we do like our note taking and stuff. And so it's late at night, it's 2 a.m, he's really busy. The partner who I was working with, the police officer, he was like really stressed. You could just see in his body language. And there's just people in the back screaming, like just moaning essentially. And I'm typing and I'm beside him, right? So we had like a desktop computer and he had his desktop with a big screen. And I'm typing. And all of a sudden he just stands up, doesn't say anything to me, doesn't look at me, just takes the computer screen, rips it off the wall, like all the cords go. And then he just throws it down the hallway and just starts screaming essentially. And I thought, oh, like this is unexpected. So I said, hey dude, like relax, whatever, what's going on? And he essentially verbalized to me that he was having a mental breakdown, essentially. The stress was high, and he articulated that he maybe wanted to hurt himself, etc. So I got him some mental health supports, and we kind of worked it out. We finished the shift and everything was good, but and then he's fine. But the key part was I thought, oh, this is not unusual amongst the group I'm working with. Another police officer, for example, he used to change his uniform. He wouldn't wear his full uniform, so he'd wear like Under Armour, but like not like that, not like his actual like police uniform, or his boots would be undone all the time. And I'd be like, hey man, your boots are undone. He goes, yeah, it's fine, which was kind of like call for help, And so I was pretty junior at this time, and there weren't a lot of mental health supports available per se, just because it's a remote community, I understand. And when I'd look around, I could see people like really in distress. And then over time, I could feel that I was starting to get into distress, because every day we were seeing like traumatic things. People weren't necessarily that friendly to us in this community. So like a lot of negative energy come in your direction. And I could just feel myself starting to sort of crumple. And I thought, I'm going to be exactly like these guys if I don't inoculate myself. So I dug into the literature and I created my own personal philosophy. It's called The Wheel of Misfortune. I'm writing a book on it right now, but there's certain proportions to it. And one of the most important is this dichotomy between this compassion idea and the empathy idea. Okay. So in that book by Paul Bloom, the psychologist, Canadian psychologist, he shows lots of different data that shows that people who naturally are empathetic, i.e. they feel what you feel, like they see the trauma, they see something bad happening, they feel what that person feels. Those people have a higher rate of burnout, and they also sometimes act not inappropriately, but there's a higher chance for them to act maybe incorrectly given the context of letting their emotions lead, not the logic. So an example would be, you feel really bad about something. You see someone who's a victim of, let's say, a domestic dispute. Someone gets punched like in the face. They're sad. And you go, oh, I empathize with that person. That might make you really mad at the bad guy or the offender, but that's not the way you should handle that scenario. You should be neutral, objective, help everyone, do the right thing, right? Like you want to treat the victim just as well as the offender, let's say. So if you're overly emotional in the scenario, you're not going to perform as well. And then the second piece is that you can go the other way when it comes to negativity. So if you're constantly engaging with negative content and taking that on yourself, if you feel what they feel, you're holding that energy, then you won't perform as well. And I could see this a lot with police officers in that community that I was working in, for example, and other areas as well. Even around the world, when I've worked with Interpol, I've seen this often where it's like someone would say something mean to you, or like there's a negative interaction, and you feel that you sit in it, and then it bugs you for hours and hours and hours. Where that was me for sure. Like I'm not special, but when I embedded this framework, I was able to clear that more effectively and do the right thing. So that's the empathetic side. The compassion side is if you're naturally aligned to looking past the emotion, not necessarily seeing that from the other person's perspective from an emotional point of view, but doing the right thing from a professional point of view. So you just go, oh, there's a scenario. I'm going to do what I'm going to aim high, and I'm going to do exactly what I know I need to do and solve that situation. So an example of this that they used at the macro was people who had survived the 9/11 attacks in New York, so the Twin Towers attack. And they surveyed people like way after, and thousands of first responders, police officers, doctors, nurses, etc., firefighters, and they benchmarked them as highly empathetic or highly compassionate, because people sometimes naturally fit into one bucket or the other, and the people who were highly empathetic had sort of negative outcomes as a population group. So when they surveyed like how they perceived that day, like 9/11, they were like, worst day ever, nothing was ever the same. It's never, like I've never seen a bright day since, like the sun's never come out. Sometimes negative outcomes mentally, and also from mental illness point of view or mental distress, and then also physically, like they passed away earlier, they had cancer, things like that. So it was like that bucket who had that empathetic response, it just chewed them up, which is understandable because everyone's a human being. The compassionate side, though, they would frame things a little bit differently. So they'd say, a terrible day, but the most meaningful day I've ever gone to work. Like all my training came into that moment, and I did good work. I'm proud of myself. Like I did the right thing. Right? And so you can see how there'd be dichotomies, right, over time if you constantly approached it from that perspective. So once I heard that, I was like, oh, this is like really nice. So I use the cue of compassion. Like I use that cue over and over and over again. Like I'd actually verbalize, I'd say compassion, 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 when I found myself starting to get pulled either emotionally high or emotionally low. So I'll give you an example. When I was in this really remote community, the same place as I articulated before, the local population, let's say, were not fans of police, to put it lightly. And so, for example, often when we'd have someone in the police vehicle, we had big trucks. So when we put someone in the back of the police truck, it was like a 20-minute drive from the village or the community, let's say, to the police station, just a dirt road, like nothing. There's no lights, nothing. It's just a flat dirt road that's pretty straight. And not everyone, but 25% of the people we'd arrest, and we might arrest 4 to 10 people a day sometimes. They would sit in the back, they got their handcuffs, and then there was something called the silent patrolman. It's the plastic like glass that's behind you as a police officer that separates you in the front of the vehicle to the cage in the back, like where you put the clients, let's say. And so these people would be in handcuffs, and they would like scooch up right to like the crack of the like silent patrolman, because there's a gap between the plastic and the roof of the vehicle, and they would just start screaming stuff at you. And so it would be stuff like, I'm going to kill you. I had a partner up there, a female police officer who was with me at the time, living in the same house because we were in group housing. And they would say, I know that girl police officer. I'm going to kill her. I'm going to do sexual things to her. But like, imagine it in the most mean possible way you could say those kind of things. And they, for just 20 minutes, would just yell at you over. Sometimes just noise, they just scream, right? It was just a thing that happened up there. And so I actually carried, because it actually hurt your ears. So I actually carried earplugs. And whenever I arrested someone, I'd put my earplugs in, I'd turn the music up, or like listen to a podcast or something. And then they would just scream the whole time, but I just kind of drone it out. before I had the compassion versus empathy framework, the screaming and yelling over time started to bother me because I was like, man, like I didn't sign up to just get yelled at. And they'd always make fun of my nose. I got a big nose, right? So they'd be like, you big nose, son of a bitch. Like, or, sometimes they're quite creative. So it kind of gets through the armor sometimes, right? And I was like, man, I do have a big nose. Shit, like I got to get that figured out. And so eventually you start to get a little bit sad, right? And so the guy, when I said he ripped off the computer screen, that essentially happened to us. We were driving back. This guy was making fun of this dude the whole time. He'd been up there for like 2 years, which is a long time to be in this really remote northern community. And he had just essentially had it, kind of like lost his mind a bit briefly, and totally understandable. And so I thought, man, I'm gonna be like this guy. So I took this compassion thing and I just applied that. And that was one of the first scenarios I had. We arrested someone. They're in the back. They're screaming at me, saying mean things. And I'm going compassion, 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 which forced me to rewrite the narrative. And I go, oh, like this person, like they're intoxicated. They've had a tough life. Like their background is difficult. If I was in their shoes, I would act the same way probably. So just by the grace of God, I'm here and it's my job to do the right thing. I'm going to be professional. Boom, change, right? So now as they're yelling to me, I'm like, this is a good chance to practice my stoic discipline. And I'm going to be like the good police officer. And so I'm like, yes, thank you. Like, tell me more. Like give me your best shot. Like what else? Like make fun of me. I'm ready. And then, when you get them out of the police car, they might yell at you or say mean things. I'm like, yes, thank you. Like, I appreciate your, like, your comments. Right. And then by the end, they're like, well, I'm not gonna be mean to this guy anymore. And everything's good. Right. So the outcomes were positive. And I noticed that the police officers with me were not able to shed that. They were held up by that emotional toxicity where I was able to clear it with this compassion thing. And I have a few other examples too. So for example, one time I was in a bedroom where we got called for an intoxicated person in a house who was wrecking everything in the house. He's knocking stuff over and stuff. His mom called and he was maybe 20 or something, but was not completely coherent when we walked in and not lucid, let's say. And he was combative with us. And so when we approached him in his bedroom, he was breaking things and we have unfortunately had to arrest him. And when we went to essentially get hands on, it was a dark room with no lights. So we had like a little flashlight. It was completely dark. And this person had thrown all of their clothes everywhere, essentially. And it was a really dirty room. It had a acidic smell. I remember the smell was like old laundry, so you can kind of imagine like that acidy kind of smell. It was really gross. Anyway, so I have my little flashlight and my partner's behind me. There's just 2 police officers. And this guy's kind of losing his mind a bit. So we go to grab him because he's combative and causing a disturbance, let's say. And when we went to grab him, he pushed me. And normally I feel like I'm tough, right? So I plant and I push back or whatever, and we'd affect the arrest. But in this case, there was lots of clothes on the ground, like you couldn't see the floor, And so I actually slid because the clothes acted like slippery, almost like you're on like snow. And so I slid and then fell backwards, and he like tackled me, kind of like he like pushed me into the closet, and the closet had like clothes hanging. So I went into the closet, the clothes were wrapped around me, and I just had my hands up, like I'm grabbing him, he's grabbing me, like his hands kind of on my face. And I was like, I'm mad now because I'm embarrassed. 1, I got like pushed into a closet. 2, I'm in the closet, which is just unpleasant in general. And maybe I'm in danger. So I was actually kind of fearful, but also mad. So now I'm just like angry. And my other partner grabbed the guy. Now they're wrestling on the bed, kind of. And I'm like, I clawed my way out of the closet. And when I came out of the closet, I did not have like love in my heart. I had real intense anger because I was embarrassed and also injured and whatever. So as I come out, I'm like ready to do some damage essentially. But as I'm approaching the scene where these 2 guys are wrestling, as I'm going to help my partner, I thought, no, compassion. It just kind of bubbled up in my mind. It was just like, boom, compassion. So I thought, oh, no, I'm going to do the right thing. I'm going to be kind. So I went compassion, compassion, compassion. And then I grabbed that guy. We were able to effect the arrest. I didn't lose my cool. I didn't do anything out of control. And I was professional. And then when I put that guy in the police car, he's kicking in the back. He tried to break the window and stuff, and it was an ordeal. But by the time we got into the cells, I was like, no, I did the right thing. I was professional, and I felt really good. So that's an example where my performance actually increased because I metric myself based on this sort of compassion metric, not the emotional feeling that I had, because the emotion can go for or against. So for example, you can overemphasize with someone in the positive, like, oh, like that person's a victim of a crime. I'm going to try extra hard, versus I don't like them very much, I'm not going to try as hard. That's both bad. The compassion keeps you flat. And I have a good example of that too. So when I was in Calgary, Alberta, I was at a grocery store, and there was a gentleman there who had lost his legs. Unfortunately, he was a a homeless person, and he had also some mental illness stuff going on. So he was not lucid. He didn't really know where he was. And unfortunately, he had lost control of his bowels and stuff like that. So it was just a real nasty kind of mess. His health was really poor. So his body was necrotic to an extent. So it just smelled profoundly bad. And this is an episode about my nose, but at this point, but I have a big nose, but I can't smell for shit. So in normal scenarios, when there's like a deceased person or like there's gross stuff around, I actually don't smell that usually. Usually I'm pretty good. So when other guys are feeling sick or they're like going to feel faint, I'm usually like pretty good. I don't have to stuff in my nose. But this particular scenario was like profound. Like he had feces and urine and also like necrotic tissue essentially because he had gotten his legs cut off relatively recently, or lost his legs, I suppose. And so yeah, so it was profound. And when I walked in, the staff of the grocery store were like, the tone was like, get this piece of trash out of here, like loser. Like, and of course, this is a person who's in distress, right? But the smell was so powerful, it created a strong negative emotion. And the other police officers who were there, I wasn't the first guy. The other police officers who were there were like, kind of like, ew, disgusting, like, ugh. And then even the paramedics, who are usually like, they're tough. They're way tougher than the police and firefighters for sure. They need to get paid more. That's my plug. But they were like, oh, this is like 10 out of 10. This is like the worst case scenario. And I was like, oh my God. And so in that scenario, I thought compassion, compassion, compassion. So even though I was revolted, I had a feeling of disgust. I was like, I'm gonna do the right thing and I'm gonna be good. And so I went to talk to that guy, tried to build some rapport. He was sort of unable to speak coherently, but was also agitated. Like he was like yelling at us, calling us names and stuff. Again, he wasn't making fun of my nose this time, but he's just making fun of me in general. And that was a negative experience. But at the end of that, when we got him in the ambulance and sent him off, I was like, I did the right thing. I got to burn all my clothes, but I did the right thing. I engaged with that guy. I was professional and I can go to bed with a smile on my face knowing I did the right thing. So that's like profound. And you can even take it in more extreme examples. Like I'll give you a more heavy one. One time I was in that different northern community. So I was way up in the north. And unfortunately, a young child under 3, let's say, unfortunately got hit by a vehicle and passed away. And so I attended the scene almost right after it happened. I wasn't the main police officer though. So there's 2 other police officers there before me and they were off doing things. And I was just standing there and I could see the deceased, unfortunately. And there was also a large community presence at that point. So the family of that infant and child were there, like the parents, as well as the wider community. And it was really emotionally intense scenario. As you can imagine, it's a tragedy, right? And it wasn't on purpose, it was an accident, but you can imagine the intensity of the situation. And normally if you're a police officer, you have a task, right? You got to go do something. You got to talk to someone, collect the interview, do something, right? Like take a picture, I don't know. But in this case, for whatever reason, I just didn't really have much to do. And and that's when you get in trouble, right? So I just stood there and I was like, oh, like I started to feel a little bit woozy. I was like, oh, this is bad. Like the strong negative emotion. I see people really upset. I'm starting to feel like real, like negative vibes, right? Because I'm just not able to focus on a task. And then I thought, no, compassion, compassion, compassion. What can I do here to be useful? And then I was like, no, time to move. So then I was compassionate in that scenario. I didn't really have a task per se, but I did the right thing. I talked to people, I was useful. And then when I finished that scenario, when we cleared that scene, hours later, I thought I did the right thing there. I'm comfortable with my performance. And so that was not a good outcome in the sense of like good in the situation, but I felt like I did as best as I could. And you can apply that to everything. Like if you're at a funeral and it's someone in your family, like, if you're highly empathetic, are you useful in that scenario or are you compassionate? I got to do the right thing. I'm going to be the strong person at the funeral. See what I'm saying? So this can apply to life in a wider context, but definitely in the law enforcement realm, this was super useful for me and didn't save my life for sure, but it made it a lot easier to live up in these really remote communities where there's this high crime index context. And I think I was able to thrive as opposed to just kind of float along. So this was a useful experience for me. I use this still in my day-to-day, not just at work, but just in general. Whenever I'm in a difficult scenario, especially highly negatively mostly charged, I'll literally say compassion, compassion, compassion. And that cues me to reframe it and to do the right thing regardless of the situation. So if you're in the first responder world, I recommend to take that little tidbit, read that book by the author I mentioned before, Against Empathy by Paul Bloom. And I recommend you use this as much as you can because it works for me. Hopefully it works for you. So that's it. I hope I'll leave it there. I hope that was useful for you guys and I'll catch you on the next video.